I'm putting my daughter to sleep a few nights ago, and we're going over how amazing Purim was. She loved her costumes. She loved the carnival. She loved her grogger. She loved her mishloach manot basket. And then she stuns me. Abba, I love Purim. I don't like Pesach. Pesach is a sad holiday. Why is Pesach a sad holiday? Because Pharaoh won't let the Jewish people go free. Yes, sweetheart, that is very upsetting. But what happens at the end? We get to be free. Exactly, just because a holiday has a scary part in it doesn't make it a sad holiday. She considers this and then looks me dead in the eye. Pesach is still a sad holiday because I can't have the snacks that I love. The truth. What snacks can't you have? Ring pops. You can have ring pops. Turkey. You can have turkey. She takes a long, deep think. My favorite cereal. Yeah, okay, sure. You got me there, little one. You can't have that one. But the question then returns, Abba, are you really sure? Can I have ring pops? They said I can only have special candy on Pesach. And it is that question that sends us down the rabbit hole as I begin the process of teaching my daughter about one of Judaism's most contested topics, kitniot. As most people know, on Passover, we don't eat chametz, the food which is explicitly prohibited in the Torah for the week of the festival. It says, quote, 7 days you shall eat matzah. On the very first day you shall remove chametz from your house. Whoever eats chametz from the first day through the seventh day, they are cut off from Israel. Chametz, according to then the Talmud, is made from wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. 5 specific grains that can be fermented and turned into matzah. And gaining any benefit or owning any of those 5 grains on Pesach is forbidden unless they are in matzah form, in which case they are kosher because they have no leavening, they have no yeast, and they probably have no flavor. Yeah. So this is why Pesach is simple, right? Pesach is easy. You just avoid those 5 things and you're fine. No. Why is it so much more complicated than that? Well, that's because of kitniot. Despite not being mentioned in the Torah and only passingly observed in the Talmud, this is the custom which defines Pesach for many Jews. Namely, that there are products which are similar enough to chametz that they carry the same prohibition. Rice and millet. Who here has eaten millet? Yeah? Okay. Well, those are the 2 that are explicitly named in the Talmud, with rice, according to Rabbi Yachanun ben Nuri, is, quote, close enough to chametz that when you eat rice, you are as guilty as if you ate chametz. But, this is an important thing, his opinion is rejected. And it goes on to tell us that Rab Huna explicitly eats beets and rice as his Seder meal. And Rav Ashi goes a step further and says, no one is concerned about the statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. That is incredible. If only that had remained true. And then we get to the 13th century France. French rabbis create a list of foods that are now forbidden to eat on Pesach. This is the list of kitniot, and it includes rice and beans, millet once again, and lentils. And their reasoning is a spiritual descendant of that forgotten and dismissed argument from Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and it goes a little like this. If we allow people to eat products that come from kitniot, such as rice flour, dried bean paste, then they might make a bread out of it. And if they make a bread out of it, then they will come to think that maybe they can also make bread out of the 5 chametz grains. This is what we classically call a sayag l'Torah, a fence around the Torah. If you don't ever break the new rule, which is a much stronger version of what I first told you, you will never break the primary rule. And this opinion, this kitniot custom, is not universally accepted then, and it's not universally accepted now. Many of the other 13th century sages outright reject it and criticize it, going as far as to call it minhag busha, or the minhag of fools, and the minhag of shame. And yet somehow it's stuck. And you know, when you have a minhag, when you have a custom in Judaism, it has a weight all of its own. What your parents did, and their parents did, and their parents did, and their parents, even if you have all of the proof in the world, theological proof, legal proof, it's very hard to move the Jews. In fact, the famed 19th century Rabbi Israel Salanter, who was one of the founders of the Musar movement, who was one of the most compelling rabbis, who managed to get people to look inside and completely change their ethical perspective on life. He would eat kitniot in public every single year, and he couldn't get his community to follow along. It's worth noting, by the way, that as an Ashkenazic custom, Sephardic Jews and Mizrahi Jews do not observe the restriction around kitniot, which is why in Israel today and in kosher supermarkets all over the world, you can find products which are on a shelf all their own. They're marked with this special little ribbon that says, Kasher lePesach leOchel kitniot. Only kosher for Pesach if you eat kitniot. And the great critique, by the way, of kitniot, both by those of us who observe it and those of us who think that it's foolishness, is that the law has gradually expanded over time. You see, normally when there's a Jewish law that makes a list, and specifically lists of animals or grains, we don't add new discoveries to that list because we don't have the modern authority to override the rabbis of the past. But in this case, because of stringencies, many halachic authorities have added foods to the list. And I know the one you all know because all Ashkenazi communities that I know of have added corn and the ubiquitous corn syrup that flows through so many of our products to the list of kitniot. This is how you get Coke with the yellow top, by the way. And this is where the clash between tradition and modern food processing begins to show. I'm going to give you the most outrageous example I could find. Do you know that there are kasher lePesach paper towels? Do you know that kasher lePesach paper towels only exist because of kitniot? So, on Pesach, paper plates, paper towels, and napkins generally contain starch. And some forms of raw starch are kitniot, such as cornstarch. And in the US, one can safely assume that starch is used in manufacturing paper products. And while mainstream Orthodox authorities say it's okay to use non-kasher lePesach paper towels, there are some that disagree, because if you wipe down your plate with a paper towel and there's a tiny speck of cornstarch on it, and it gets on the plate, and then the plate gets wet, and you eat off the plate, you'll have eaten kitniot, which is almost like eating chametz. Chaval lanu, we're all doomed. But this may surprise you greatly. It is not the constant presence of corn or corn syrup or cornstarch that has damaged the kitniot monopoly. That honor belongs to one tiny little grain that we all love, quinoa. Quinoa, which is a beloved mainstay today of Jewish families and Shabbat tables around the world, didn't come into our diets until it started being exported in the late 1990s. And no one can agree about quinoa and its kitniot status. The Rabbanut in Israel says it is kitniot. The Orthodox Union of North America says it's not. The Reform movement says it's not kitniot. Chabad says, ask your rabbi. And the conservative movement, God bless, in 2016, they got rid of kitniot altogether. And nevertheless, our communal indecision has created a gap. And into that gap comes the third group. Because now we have the Jews that eat kitniot, and we have the Jews that don't eat kitniot, and now we also have the Jews that fight over whether it's not to serve quinoa at your Seder. Is that what I told my daughter as I was trying to put her to bed? No. No, I told her, ring pops are kosher, because they are. Because in our house, where there's a Sephardic rabbi and an Ashkenazic rabbi, we agreed to go by the Sephardic custom. And that's how we're going to go. And I told her, we're going to go over Kashrut and Pesach observances as we get older. But I did say, the thing I want you to know, the real reason why Pesach isn't a sad holiday is because of all the memories and all the traditions that we're going to be making in just under a month when Passover arrives. We're going to have our homemade pickles, and we're going to have our beautiful brisket, and you're going to sing the 4 questions, so you better start practicing. But above all, I focused on the eternal promise of Pesach, and it's the promise that we need all the time, but especially on a hard week like this one, that even if you think it's impossible, and even if the world tells you it will never happen, there are miracles, and there are signs, and there are wonders, and they can be abundant because the dark times always come to an end. Shabbat Shalom. Together, let us get ready to imagine a better world where those dark times have come to an end forever. Aleinu, page 139. Please rise.